The rain hammered against the bulletproof windows of the black Mercedes as it tore through the neon-lit streets of Seoul's Gangnam district. Inside, Kim Tae-jin sat with the stillness of a predator, his scarred hands folded across his lap, his eyes cold as winter steel. At 42, he was the undisputed king of the Baekho Clan, one of the most feared Korean mafia organizations in East Asia. His empire stretched from the glittering casinos of Busan to the underground fight clubs of Tokyo, built on blood, loyalty, and an iron will that had never once faltered. Until tonight. "Boss, we've located the girl," said Minho, his second-in-command, turning from the passenger seat. His voice carried the weight of bad news. "She's at the Sadamun homeless shelter, the one near the old subway station." Tae-jin's jaw tightened. The girl, the witness. 3 weeks ago, she'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. A 16-year-old street rat who'd seen him execute a traitor in an alley behind a pojangmatcha. In his world, witnesses didn't get second chances. They got unmarked graves. "How certain are you?" Tae-jin's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the vehicle like a blade. 100%. Our informant confirmed it. She's been hiding there, working in exchange for a bed. Goes by the name Jiwon. Tae-jin nodded slowly. "Then we finish this tonight. No witnesses, no loose ends." The Mercedes merged into traffic, its destination set. Behind them, 2 more vehicles followed, 10 of his best soldiers, armed and ready. This should have been simple, clean, just another name crossed off his list. But as they drove through the rain-soaked streets, Tae-jin's mind wandered to the one thing that could crack his iron composure, his daughter, Soo-ah. 8 years old, born profoundly deaf, the light of his dark world. His wife, Ji-hye, had died giving birth to her, and in that moment, Tae-jin had made a silent vow. He would give Soo-ah everything, the best doctors, the best schools, the best cochlear implant specialists in the world. But despite millions spent, countless surgeries, and consultations with the finest medical minds from Seoul to Johns Hopkins, nothing had worked. Soo-ah remained trapped in silence, communicating only through sign language and the tablets he'd bought her. She was his weakness, his only weakness. And tonight, while he was about to end a girl's life, Soo-ah was at home with her grandmother, probably reading one of her picture books, her small fingers tracing the illustrations she couldn't hear described aloud. "We're here, boss." The car slowed to a stop 3 blocks from the shelter. Tae-jin stepped out into the rain, his long black coat billowing behind him. The night smelled of wet asphalt and street food from a distant vendor. His men assembled around him, hands resting on concealed weapons. "Minho, you and Chan-woo cover the back exit. The rest of you surround the building. I want no one in or out until I give the word." Tae-jin's orders were crisp, military precise. "I'll handle the burl myself." They moved like shadows through the darkness, professionals who'd done this dance 100 times before. The shelter was a crumbling 3-story building wedged between a shuttered pharmacy and a noraebang. Its windows glowed with dim yellow light, and through the rain-streaked glass, Tae-jin could see silhouettes moving inside. The homeless, the forgotten, the desperate. And somewhere among them, the girl who'd sealed her own fate by witnessing his justice. Tae-jin approached the front entrance, his hand sliding under his coat to rest on the grip of his Glock. The door wasn't locked. These places never were. Inside, the smell hit him first. Unwashed bodies, instant ramyeon, and industrial disinfectant. A handful of people sat scattered across plastic chairs, some sleeping, others staring at nothing. An elderly volunteer looked up from behind a desk. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for someone," Tae-jin said, his voice smooth, almost polite. "A girl, 16, maybe 17, goes by the name Jiwon." The volunteer's eyes flickered with recognition and something else, protectiveness. "We don't give out information about our residents."
Tae-jin smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He pulled out a money clip thick with 50,000 won notes and set it on the desk. Let me rephrase. Where is Ji-won? The volunteer stared at the money, then at Tae-jin's face. Whatever she saw there made her decision easy. 3rd floor, room 304. She shares it with 3 other girls. Smart choice. Tae-jin pocketed the clip and headed for the stairs. The building creaked with every step, the walls covered in peeling paint and inspirational posters about perseverance and hope. Tae-jin had seen 1,000 places like this in his rise to power, breeding grounds for desperation, where people could be bought for the price of a meal or eliminated without anyone asking questions. Room 304's door was slightly ajar. Through the gap he could hear whispered conversation, young voices sharing stories in the darkness. His hand tightened on his weapon. This was the moment. Quick, clean, professional. One shot, suppressor muffling the sound, and he'd be gone before anyone even knew to scream. He pushed the door open. 4 sets of eyes turned towards him, widening with fear. The room was barely larger than a prison cell, with 2 bunk beds and a single small window. 3 of the girls immediately pressed themselves against the far wall, but the 4th, a thin girl with short-cropped hair and defiant eyes, stood her ground. "You," Tae-jin said, recognizing her from the grainy security footage. "Ji-won." "I knew you'd come," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. "Then you know why I'm here." "Because I saw you kill that man." Ji-won's chin lifted. "The one who was begging for his life. The one you shot 3 times and left in the trash." "He was a traitor. He got what traitors deserved," Tae-jin said, pulling out his weapon, the suppressor already attached. The other 3 girls started crying, whimpering prayers into their hands. "Wait." Ji-won held up a hand, and something in her eyes made him pause. "If you're going to kill me anyway, can I ask you something first? One question. Then you can do what you came to do." Tae-jin considered this. He was a man of certain principles, twisted as they were. "One question. Do you have children?" That question struck him like a physical blow. His finger tensed on the trigger. "That's none of your business." "I'll take that as a yes." Ji-won's expression softened. "Then you understand. You understand what it means to want to protect someone, to give them everything, to fix what's broken." "What are you talking about? 3 weeks ago, I didn't just see you kill that man. I saw something else." She reached slowly into her pocket. Tae-jin's weapon tracked the movement, and pulled out a small Ziploc bag containing what looked like a piece of amber. "I saw this fall out of his pocket when you shot him. I picked it up before I ran." Tae-jin stared at the object. It was about the size of a marble, translucent gold, with something dark suspended inside. "So you're a thief, too?" "I didn't steal it for money. I didn't even know what it was until yesterday." Ji-won held it up to the light. "I showed it to a woman who stays here sometimes, Mrs. Park. She used to be a researcher before she lost everything. She looked at it under a microscope I borrowed from a school dumpster." Ji-won's voice grew urgent. "Do you know what's inside this amber?" "I don't care." "You should, because inside is a perfectly preserved insect from over 40 million years ago, and not just any insect, one that produces a protein compound that, according to Mrs. Park's research, could potentially regenerate damaged cochlear hair cells." Tae-jin's blood ran cold. "What did you say? Your daughter is death, isn't she?" Ji-won's jing lifted with something between desperation and hope. "The man you killed, he was a researcher too. I've been asking around, trading favors for information. His name was Dr. Han Jun-suk. He worked for a pharmaceutical company until he stole research materials and sold them to the highest bidder. This amber, he was going to sell it to Chinese buyers for $10 million. The room spun. Tae-jin's weapon wavered. Dr. Han, the traitor. He'd been selling clan secrets, so Tae-jin's intelligence had said. But if this girl is telling the truth, you're lying. This is a trick. Then kill me and destroy the one thing that might save your daughter's hearing. Ji-won's voice cracked. Or you can take me to her, and let me prove I'm telling the truth. Why? The word came out as a growl. Why would you help me? I came here to murder you. Because I understand what it's like to be desperate, to be powerless. Ji-won's eyes glistened with tears. My little brother was deaf too. We lived on the streets together for 3 years after our parents died. I would have done anything, stolen, lied, killed to help him, but I couldn't. He got sick last winter, and I couldn't afford medicine. He died in my arms, and the last thing I signed to him was, "I'm sorry I couldn't fix you." The silence that followed was deafening. Tae-jin's mind raced through possibilities, probabilities, potential traps. This could be an elaborate setup by a rival clan, or law enforcement, or it could be exactly what it appeared, a desperate girl offering the one thing she knew might save her life. Her daughter's face flashed through him.
Ji-won's expression crumbled. Min Jae. He was 6 when he died, born deaf like your daughter. Our parents tried to get him help, but we were poor. After they passed in a car accident, the state tried to separate us. I ran away with him. She stared out the window. We managed for a while. I stole food, found places to sleep, but that winter was brutal. He got pneumonia, and I couldn't get him to a hospital without identity papers. I held him in an underpass while he suffocated, and I couldn't even call for help because I was afraid they'd take him away from me permanently. How long ago? 8 months. Tae-jin processed this. And you've been on the streets since then? Until 3 weeks ago, when I saw you kill that doctor. I thought about going to the police, but then I found the amber, and I realized maybe Min Jae's death could mean something. Maybe I could save another deaf child, even if I couldn't save him. They pulled through the gates of Tae-jin's estate, a sprawling modern compound in Seongbuk-dong, one of Seoul's most exclusive neighborhoods. High walls, security cameras, armed guards. Ji-won's eyes widened at the opulence. "Stay close to me," Tae-jin ordered, "and don't try anything stupid." Inside, the house was a masterpiece of minimalist luxury. Marble floors, contemporary art, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a private garden. An elderly woman appeared, Tae-jin's mother-in-law, her expression concerned. "Tae-jin, what's going on? And who is this girl?" "Where's Soo-ah?" "Asleep in her room, but—" "Good. Keep her there. I have business to handle." He turned to Ji-won. "You wait in the study. Don't touch anything." Dr. Yoon arrived 20 minutes later, a distinguished man in his 60s carrying a medical bag. Tae-jin had paid him millions over the years, funding his research on cochlear regeneration in exchange for priority treatment for Soo-ah. If anyone could verify Ji-won's claim, it was him. "This better be important," Dr. Yoon grumbled. "I was at a very important dinner." "It is." Tae-jin handed him the amber. "Tell me what's inside this." Dr. Yoon pulled out a jeweler's loupe and examined it carefully. His expression changed from annoyance to confusion to intense interest. "Where did you get this?" "Just tell me what it is." "I'd need to run proper tests, but if my eyes aren't deceiving me, this appears to be a Cretaceous period insect, possibly a Coleoptera beetle variant, preserved in Burmese amber. The preservation is extraordinary." He looked up. "Do you know what this could mean?" "Assume I don't." Dr. Yoon's hands trembled slightly. "There are theories, controversial theories, about ancient insects producing unique protein compounds that modern species no longer possess. Some researchers believe these compounds could have regenerative properties. There was a study 5 years ago, Dr. Han's study, that suggested—" He stopped. "Wait, Dr. Han Jun-suk, the one who disappeared last month. The scientific community assumed he'd fled to China with stolen research. Did you—" "Focus, doctor. Can this help my daughter?" Dr. Yoon's face paled as he understood the implications. I don't know. The theory is sound, but it's never been tested. Extracting tissue samples from the insect, analyzing the protein structures, comparing them against Soo-ah's specific condition.
2 weeks, maybe 3. You have 1 week. I'll provide whatever resources you need, lab equipment, staff, funding, whatever it takes. Tae-jin, I can't promise. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for your best work. Tae-jin's voice dropped to something dangerous. And doctor, if you mention this to anyone, if you betray me in any way, I'll make sure you join Dr. Han. Dr. Yoon swallowed hard and nodded. I understand. I'll start immediately. After the doctor left with the amber and a guarantee of 24-hour access to a private research facility Tae-jin owned, the mafia boss turned his attention back to Ji-won. She sat in his study, surrounded by leather-bound books and expensive scotch, looking completely out of place. You bought yourself 1 week. If Dr. Yoon confirms this could work, you live. If not, he didn't need to finish the sentence. And if it does work, if we can help your daughter? Tae-jin considered this. Then I'll owe you a debt, and I always pay my debts. I don't want money. This surprised him. Everyone wants money. I want a purpose. Ji-won's eyes met his with startling intensity. My brother died for nothing. He suffered for nothing. If this saves your daughter, then his death, our suffering, it means something. That's worth more than any amount of money. For the first time in years, Kim Tae-jin felt something he'd thought he'd buried with his wife. Respect for another human being. You'll stay here, under guard. Consider yourself a guest, but don't mistake that for freedom. I understand. He arranged for her to have a room in the guest wing, posted guards outside, and finally allowed himself to check on Sua. His daughter's room was exactly as he had left it, walls covered with her drawings, shelves packed with books, and in the center, his precious girl, sleeping peacefully. Tae-jin sat on the edge of her bed and gently brushed hair from her forehead. She stirred, her eyes opening. When she saw him, her face lit up and her hands began moving in sign language. "Daddy, you're home!" "I'm home, little one," he signed back, his scarred hands surprisingly graceful in their movements. "How was your day?" "Good. Grandmother taught me to make kimchi pancakes, and I finished another book. But Daddy, when can I hear? When will the doctors fix my ears?" The question broke his heart every time she asked it. Usually he'd say something vague about someday or we're working on it. But tonight, with Ji-won's desperate gambit running through his mind, he signed something different. "Soon, Sua. I promise. Very soon." The week that followed was the longest of Tae-jin's life. Dr. Yoon worked around the clock in the private facility, a former pharmaceutical lab that Tae-jin had acquired through less than legal means. He received daily updates, each one a roller coaster of hope and frustration. Day 2, the insect's tissues are remarkably preserved. I've isolated 3 distinct protein compounds. Day 4, one of the compounds shows promise in preliminary cell culture tests. It appears to stimulate hair cell regeneration in chicken cochlear samples. Day 6, I've successfully synthesized a stable version of the compound. But Tae-jin, testing this on your daughter without proper clinical trials, it's dangerous. It could cause seizures, allergic reactions, even death. I didn't ask for a safety lecture. I asked if it could work. Yes, in theory, it could restore her hearing. But the risks? Acceptable. Continue.
Meanwhile, Ji-won remained at the estate. Tae-jin had expected her to cower, to beg, to show the fear that any sane person would feel being held captive by a mafia boss. Instead, she surprised him daily. On the 3rd day, he found her in the garden teaching Sua sign language games. His daughter was laughing, actual laughter, her small body shaking with joy as Ji-won pretended to be different animals with elaborate hand gestures. "What are you doing?" Tae-jin's voice was sharp, protective. Ji-won stood, but not submissively. "Teaching her. She asked me to."
Sua ran to her father, signing rapidly. "Daddy, Ji-won knows sign language. She learned it for her brother. She's teaching me new words. Can she stay, please?" Tae-jin looked at Ji-won, who met his gaze steadily. "Your guards said I couldn't leave the estate. They didn't say I couldn't spend time with Sua. She's lonely." "She has her grandmother." "Grandmother is kind, but she doesn't understand what it's like to be deaf. I do." Ji-won's expression softened. "If you're going to kill me anyway, at least let me do something good with my last days." Against his better judgment, Tae-jin allowed it, and over the following days he watched something remarkable happen. Sua, who'd always been somewhat withdrawn, came alive around Ji-won. They spent hours together, painting, playing games, communicating in the visual language that united them. On the fifth evening, Tae-jin found Ji-won in the library reading a medical textbook about cochlear implants. "Interesting choice," he said. She didn't startle. "I want to understand what Sua has been through, all the surgeries, the failures. It helps me know what questions to ask Dr. Yoon." "You've been speaking with Dr. Yoon?" "He came by yesterday to see Sua, to run some baseline tests. We talked." Ji-won closed the book. "He said you've spent over $7 million trying to help her, that you've consulted with specialists on 3 continents, that you've never given up, even when every doctor said it was hopeless." "She's my daughter." "I know. That's why I'm not afraid of you anymore." Ji-won stood, facing him directly. "You're terrifying to your enemies. You're brutal to anyone who crosses you. But with Sua, you're just a father who'd do anything to help his child. I understand that. I was that person once." "You failed." The words were cruel, and he saw them hit their mark. But Ji-won didn't flinch. "Yes, I did, but maybe I can help you succeed." The 7th day arrived. Dr. Yoon called an emergency meeting at midnight. Tae-jin, Ji-won, and his most trusted advisors gathered in his home office. The doctor looked exhausted, but strangely energized. "I've completed the synthesis and initial safety testing. The compound, I'm calling it Compound H after Dr. Han, shows a 93% success rate in regenerating cochlear hair cells in mammalian test subjects. No significant adverse reactions in any of the trials." "What about the 7% failure rate?" Tae-jin asked. "Those subjects showed no improvement, but also no harm. The compound simply didn't work for them. Based on Sua's specific type of cochlear damage, I believe she falls in the 93% probability of success." "You believe?" "Science is never 100% certain, but if you want my professional opinion, this could work. This could actually restore your daughter's hearing." Dr. Yoon's hands trembled as he held up a small vial of clear liquid. "However, I need to be absolutely clear about the risks. This has never been tested on humans. There could be unknown side effects. Sua could experience pain, disorientation, or in the worst-case scenario—" "How is it administered?" "A single injection into the middle ear cavity. The compound would need 6 to 8 weeks to fully regenerate the damaged structures. During that time, she'd need to be monitored constantly." Tae-jin looked at Ji-won. "This was your idea. What do you think?" She seemed surprised to be consulted. "It's not my decision to make." "I'm making it your decision. You put this in motion. Should I risk my daughter's life on a street girl's desperate gamble?" The room fell silent. Ji-won's face cycled through emotions: fear, responsibility, determination. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady. "Yes, because the alternative is letting her live in silence forever, because sometimes the biggest risk is never taking one, and because—" her voice cracked, "because I wish someone had been willing to take this risk for Min-jae." Tae-jin looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Dr. Yoon, prepare the treatment. We'll do it tomorrow morning." That night, Tae-jin couldn't sleep. He stood in Sua's doorway, watching her sleep, wondering if he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Around 2 a.m., he heard soft footsteps and found Ji-won standing beside him. "Can't sleep either?" she whispered. "No. I keep thinking, what if I'm wrong? What if it hurts her?" "Then I'll kill you slowly." He said it without emotion, a simple statement of fact. "I know, but I still think it's the right choice." They stood in silence, two people from different worlds, united by their love for deaf children and their willingness to gamble everything on a miracle. Morning came too quickly. Dr. Yoon arrived with his medical team and equipment. Sua was excited, thinking she was getting another routine checkup. Tae-jin had decided not to tell her about the treatment until we knew if it worked. False hope was crueler than no hope. The procedure took place in a medical suite Tae-jin had built into the estate, fully equipped, sterile, and private. Sua sat on the examination table, signing questions to her father. "Will this hurt?" "Only a little pinch, like getting a shot," he signed back. "Will it help me hear?" Tae-jin hesitated, then signed, "We hope so, little one. We really hope so." Dr. Yoon administered a local anesthetic, then carefully inserted a microneedle into Sua's eardrum, into her middle ear cavity. Tae-jin held his daughter's hand, his other hand resting on the Glock at his hip, an unconscious gesture of protection. Ji-won watched from the doorway, her fingers pressed to her lips. The injection took less than 30 seconds. Sua winced but didn't cry. Dr. Yoon withdrew the needle, applied a small bandage, and stepped back. "It's done. Now we wait." "How long?" Tae-jin demanded. "First signs of regeneration should appear within 48 to 72 hours. Full restoration, if it works, will take 6 to 8 weeks. Dr. Yoon pulled off his gloves. "I'll stay here to monitor her. Any changes, pain, fever, disorientation, call me immediately." Tae-jin signed to Sua. "All done. You were very brave." "That's it? That's the treatment that might help me hear?" "Yes." Sua's face fell. "But I don't feel any different." "Give it time, little one." The waiting was agony. 48 hours passed with no change. 72 hours. Tae-jin became increasingly volatile, snapping at his subordinates, canceling meetings. Ji-won stayed close to Sua, playing games, reading stories, keeping the little girl's spirits up, even as her own hope began to waver. On the 5th day, Sua woke up crying. Tae-jin rushed to her room, fear clutching his chest. "What's wrong? Are you in pain?" Sua's hands moved frantically. "My ear feels weird, like there's buzzing inside. It doesn't hurt, but it's strange." Dr. Yoon was called immediately. He examined her, ran tests, and finally smiled, the first genuine smile Tae-jin had seen from him in days. "How long until she can actually hear?" "Based on the regeneration rate, 2 more weeks, maybe 3, but the buzzing will get louder, more distinct. She'll start perceiving vibrations as proto-sounds. It will be disorienting for her." It was. Over the following days, Sua experienced the world beginning to crack open. She'd feel vibrations when someone walked into the room. She'd sense when music was playing, even if she couldn't hear it yet. The confusion frightened her, but Ji-won was there constantly, signing reassurances, explaining what was happening. "Your ears are waking up," Ji-won signed, "like when your foot falls asleep and then tingles when it wakes. The tingling means it's getting better." 2 weeks became 3, 3 became 4, and then on a Tuesday morning in early autumn, something miraculous happened. Tae-jin was in his office when he heard a scream, not of pain, but of shock. He ran through the house, weapon drawn, prepared for an attack. Instead, he found Sua standing in the garden, her eyes wide with wonder, tears streaming down her face. Ji-won stood a few feet away, her hands covering her mouth.
"Daddy!" Sua wasn't signing, she was speaking aloud, something she'd been taught but rarely used because she couldn't hear her own voice. "Daddy, I can hear you walking. I can hear the fountain. I can hear—" She spun around, listening. Is that birds? Are those birds singing? Tae-jin's knees went weak. He sank to the ground, pulling Sua into his arms. For the first time since his wife's death, he wept. Yes, little one, those are birds. They're so loud! Is everything this loud? You'll get used to it. And your voice! Daddy, I can hear your voice! You sound so different than I imagined. Dr. Yoon arrived within the hour and conducted extensive tests. The results were unprecedented. Sua's cochlear hair cells had regenerated completely. Her hearing was at 95% of normal range. The 7% loss was in the extreme high-frequency range, sounds most people couldn't hear anyway. It's a miracle, Dr. Yoon breathed. In 40 years of practice, I've never seen anything like this. This compound, it could revolutionize treatment for hearing loss worldwide. But Tae-jin wasn't thinking about the world. He was watching his daughter discover sound for the first time. She'd walk from room to room, identifying every noise, the hum of the refrigerator, the click of light switches, the rustle of curtains, the sound of her own laughter. That evening, after Sua had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from sensory overload, Tae-jin found Ji-won sitting alone in the garden. You saved her, he said simply. And Ji-won didn't look at him. The amber saved her. I just brought it to you. You could have sold it. $10 million, you said. Instead, you gave it to a man who was about to kill you. Money doesn't bring back the dead. Tae-jin sat beside her. You were right about everything. The compound worked. My daughter can hear, and I owe you a debt. I told you I don't want... I know what you said, but I'm Kim Tae-jin. I don't leave debts unpaid. He pulled out an envelope and set it in front of her. Inside is your new identity. Legal documents, birth certificate, bank account with 10 million won, enough to start a new life. You're free to go. No one in my organization will ever touch you. Ji-won stared at the envelope, but didn't touch it. And if I don't want to go? Why wouldn't you? Because for the first time since Min-jae died, I have a purpose. Sua needs someone who understands what she's going through. Learning to hear after 8 years of silence, it's going to be overwhelming. She'll need help adjusting, learning to process sounds, understanding speech. I can help her with that. You want to stay? If you'll let me, not as a prisoner, but as someone who can help your daughter navigate this new world. Tae-jin considered this. It was insane, keeping a witness, a street girl, in his home. His advisors would think he'd gone soft. His enemies might see it as a weakness. But when he thought about Sua's face as she heard birds for the first time, none of that mattered. You'll live in the estate. You'll be provided for. Clothes, education, anything you need. In exchange, you help Sua adjust. You teach her, guide her. I'm not qualified. You're the only person qualified. You understand her in ways no specialist ever could. Ji-won finally picked up the envelope, opened it, and looked at the documents. Then she set it down. I'll stay, but I want to finish my education too. I dropped out of school when my parents died. I want to go back, get my diploma, maybe even go to university. Done. I'll arrange for private tutors initially, then enrollment in the best schools. And I want to help Dr. Yoon with his research. If this compound can help other deaf children, it should. Min-jae should matter. His death should mean something more than just saving one girl. This gave Tae-jin a pause. Going public with the compound meant attention, questions, scrutiny he didn't need. But he saw the determination in Ji-won's eyes and recognized it as the same steel that had made her survive on the streets, the same strength that had made her face down a mafia boss with nothing but a piece of amber and hope. I'll speak with Dr. Yoon. We'll find a way to do it carefully. Ji-won nodded, satisfied. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the fountain and the evening birds. sounds that now meant everything to both of them. 6 months later, the transformation was complete. Soo-ah had adapted to hearing with remarkable speed. She attended a regular school now, with Ji-won tutoring her after hours to help her catch up. The two were inseparable, big sister and little sister, bound by their shared understanding of silence and sound. Dr. Yoon had successfully synthesized enough compound H to begin limited clinical trials, funded through a legitimate medical research foundation that Tae-jin established. The first 20 patients, all children with severe cochlear damage, had received treatment. 18 were showing signs of improvement. Ji-won had earned her high school diploma and been accepted to Seoul National University's audiology program. She still lived at the estate, in a suite that had become her home. Tae-jin had even introduced her to his organization, not as a member, but as someone under his protection. Anyone who touched her would answer to him personally. As for Tae-jin himself, he found that the miracle hadn't just transformed his daughter, it had changed him. He still ran his empire with an iron fist, still eliminated threats without mercy, but he'd learned that some debts couldn't be paid with money or violence. Some debts required something more: humanity, gratitude, trust. One evening, as autumn gave way to winter, the three of them sat together in the garden. Soo-ah was practicing her violin, an instrument she'd insisted on learning now that she could hear music. Ji-won was helping her with finger positions, while Tae-jin watched from a bench. "Daddy," Soo-ah called out, "do I sound better?" "Much better, little one. Ji-won says I need to practice 2 hours every day if I want to be good." Ji-won is right. Soo-ah returned to her practice, the notes floating through the garden, sometimes correct, sometimes painfully off-key, but always beautiful to Tae-jin's ears. Ji-won caught his eye and smiled, and he found himself smiling back. It had been a strange journey, from the rain-soaked streets where he'd planned a murder to this moment of peace, from a desperate girl with a piece of amber to a young woman who'd become part of his family, from a daughter trapped in silence to one who could hear the music she created. Sometimes Tae-jin still thought about that night at the shelter, about how close he'd come to pulling the trigger, about how one decision, one moment of curiosity about a simple question had changed everything. Dr. Han Jun-sak, the traitor he'd executed, had been working on revolutionary research, but it wasn't clan secrets he'd been protecting. It was a discovery that could help thousands of deaf children. The man had been a thief and a liar, but perhaps his life and death had meaning after all. And Ji-won's brother, Min-jae, the 6-year-old boy who died in an underpass, suffocating in his sister's arms. His suffering had led to this moment. His death had given his sister the knowledge, the empathy, and the desperate courage to face down a killer with nothing but hope. "What are you thinking about?" Ji-won asked, sitting beside him as Soo-ah continued her practice. "About how strange life is. How the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes. How sometimes the person you think is your enemy turns out to be your salvation." "You mean me?" "I mean both of us. I almost killed you. You almost died. And now, look at us." Ji-won watched Soo-ah play, her expression soft. Min-jae would have loved this. He would have loved Soo-ah. They would have been friends. "Tell me about him. Really tell me. I want to know." So Ji-won did. She told stories about her brother, how he'd laughed at funny faces, how he'd loved drawing animals, how he'd been afraid of thunderstorms, but brave about everything else. She told stories about their parents, about the life they'd had before everything fell apart. And Tae-jin listened, not as a mafia boss, not as a man who'd built an empire on violence, but as a father who understood loss and love and the desperate hope that drives us all. When Sua finished her practice and ran to them, signing and speaking simultaneously, still not quite trusting that sound would always be there, Tae-jin pulled both girls close. "I have an announcement," he said. "Dr. Yoon's clinical trials have been successful. We're expanding the program. In 6 months, we'll be able to treat 100 children. In a year, maybe 1,000. "Really?" Ji-won's eyes shone with tears. "That many?" "That many. And I want you to be part of it. You and Dr. Yoon, running the foundation, making sure Min-jae's legacy helps every deaf child you can reach." "But I'm not qualified." "You're the most qualified person I know. You understand what these children face. You understand what their families go through." He met her eyes. "Will you do it?" Ji-won looked at Sua, then back at him. Yes, I'll do it." That night, after Sua was asleep and Ji-won had returned to her suite, Tae-jin stood alone in his office, looking at the framed photograph of his late wife. "I did it, Ji-hae. I fixed what was broken. Not the way I expected, not through money or power or connections, but through grace, through mercy I didn't know I had." He thought about the piece of amber now preserved in Dr. Yoon's lab, being studied by researchers from around the world. He thought about Dr. Han, whose death seemed meaningless, but ultimately saved his daughter. He thought about Ji-won, who'd walked into certain death carrying nothing but hope and a marble-sized piece of fossilized tree resin. And he thought about all the children who would hear for the first time because of a series of impossible coincidences. A dead researcher, a desperate girl, a fossilized insect from 40 million years ago, and a father's love. Life, Tae-jin had learned, was strange, brutal and beautiful, terrifying and miraculous. And sometimes, just sometimes, the girl you almost killed becomes the one who saves you. In the morning, Sua would wake to birdsong and her father's voice. Ji-won would begin her classes, working toward a future helping deaf children. And Kim Tae-jin would continue running his empire, but with something he thought he'd lost forever: hope. The rain had stopped. The birds were singing, and for the first time in years, the sound of laughter filled the house, pure, joyful, and loud enough for everyone to hear.